Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss, the current climate of childcare in Canada. LCCN, Strive and Fanshawe really appreciate your attendance today. So beginning in March, the advocacy subcommittee began to form to address funding challenges we were facing. As the committee worked through these issues, we began to realize how vital an advocacy group was for childcare overall in this city. Today in the town hall, we're going to take you through three sections of childcare in London: our vision, our current reality, and making this vision a reality. So this will allow you to have a better understanding of what the London childcare community has been going through during the challenging time of COVID.
As our daughter transitioned through the levels of the center, we became very fond of the caregivers, the early childhood educators, and the rest of the support staff in the center. We acknowledged their expertise and realized how extremely lucky we were to have ministry-regulated and licensed professionals guiding our little ones through the defining years of childhood.
And the reason we've been doing this is because the perception of our profession has been one of, we're babysitting, or we're offering a place for children to go when families need to work, particularly for mothers. And, from the rights of the child, we really wanted to inform people about the importance of education in the early years and how it's equally important to elementary education or secondary education, or possibly even more important. So that was sort of our role to share that information and educate others. So LCCN's vision for our community is to provide families with peace of mind as they go to work each day, knowing their children are learning and growing with their peers and their qualified educators in a safe and secure environment. So in order to ensure licensed childcare environments continue to be sustainable, LCCN advocates for more support for the profession to ensure operators can attract and retain qualified educators, to collaborate with local partners, to ensure our community is aware of our early learning services, to support pre-service training, to ensure those going into the profession are the right fit, and to provide, we often provide learning opportunities for pre-service training, and also to showcase the important work that RECEs do every day.
An area we wish to strive for within our vision for the national childcare system is including children's perspectives, as it's a guiding principle in all we do in the early years. Children are creative, curious, and competent human beings. They have the right to be included in their development, care, and learning. In collaboration with the College of the Early Childhood Education, Dr. Clinton explained the pivotal role of a registered early childhood educator in supporting children's mental health. Educators should strive to brighten up a child's day the moment they enter their room.
Today, we will focus on three key areas of concern that have become more visible during the pandemic as follows. Number one, unstable funding. Number two, a lack of consistent communication and messaging between levels of government and between ministries. And number three, a lack of recognition and respect for the educators who work in licensed childcare and the operators of these programs.
We were given 3 days, in reality 2 days, to implement safe procedures for reopening with no clear direction on how we were going to be able to pay for these enhanced procedures, and no time to secure the appropriate PPE for our very, very vulnerable educators. While the province paid for the increased costs of running emergency childcare for essential workers, the operators of childcare centers have not been given any additional money for reopening. None of the promised funding has materialized as of yet. And so we wait for decisions. We wait for decisions that could put us into very huge deficits or could ultimately close our doors. If not today, then in the coming year.
During the pandemic period, we have found ourselves more responsible than ever for our staff, children, and families. Our center kept communication with the families and the kids through our staff. Management were in constant communication with the staff to keep them informed. And more important, to support them and keep good relation, which was the key for the fast reopening.
Through each press conference, it became apparent that we still had to fight for our sector to be recognized. There were digs to our sector in each announcement, and we felt like we were centered out compared to other sectors. For example, early childhood educators working in the emergency childcare centers were not recognized with the pandemic pay, although they were the ones that were working with the children of the frontline workers who had direct exposure to this virus. When the announcement came from the provincial government that the centers would be allowed to reopen their doors for families, we were again the only sector provided with little notice. All other sectors were told to get ready in the weeks approaching as they would be reopening in phase 1, 2, or 3. Childcares were promised 2 weeks notice, but were only given 3 days notice to open with no guidelines. This announcement was made at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the officials assured the public that we had all the information that we needed to open. But in fact, we as directors and the centers did not receive any guidelines until 11 p.m. that evening. Our sector went into this pandemic with recruitment and retaining issues already. And the way our government portrayed our well-educated, valuable, and passionate educators in their messaging left many persons feeling unheard, unrecognized, and feeling like an afterthought or a lesser priority. This has resulted in many professionals reevaluating their long-term commitment or even exiting our sector at a time in which we, the children and the families, need them the most.
There seems to be a lack of explicit guiding principles, as we are seeing now through the lived experience that you have just heard with regards to the sustainability of a quality early years system for Canadian children, and obviously particularly right now for London and area. So we know from the Atkinson Centre at the University of Toronto, from the Early Childhood Education Report in 2017, that this is very much a need across our country. The divide between early years systems and educational system continues to become more and more apparent. And again, the impact of COVID-19 has very much been at the forefront in the last while. This grassroots construction of an early years policy prototype goes beyond consultation to what is described as human-centered policy, of having those most impacted by a policy co-create its key guidelines, how they see it operationalized. It goes beyond the voice of expert. It acknowledges the voice of the key stakeholders, again, parents, childcare providers, and early years professionals, and what they see as key. This process of co-design of a policy is anchored on the user participation, a key element of participatory democracy. The process of this research allows for London and area key stakeholders' perspective on how they wish to support their children's development, their readiness for learning, and school. It empowers the participants to voice what they see as key to meeting the rights of the children in our community to access a quality early years system, while also providing an opportunity to address women's rights, both from a perspective of mothers and early years professionals.
Sorry, fellas. These gendered inequities have been never more acutely felt than during this pandemic. 62% of the job loss as a result of the pandemic were positions held by women. And as phased reopening began, men regained employment at 2 times the rate women did. As it stands, women's participation in the labor market is the lowest it's been in over 30 years. With women accounting for half of Canada's workforce, there is no economic recovery without them, and as such, there is no economic recovery without childcare. Access to affordable childcare has been recognized as a cornerstone to women's equality, a key element to mitigating poverty, and has been identified as a primary recommendation for closing the persistent gender pay gap. the proximity in the public eye of work in the early years with acts of mothering has long been a narrative used to limit the social mobility of women performing care work professionally, a narrative that is unfortunately reinforced by current public policy. A national strategy would not only see educators receive professional pay for professional work, but would put them in a better position to receive greater professional recognition as well. An empowered ECE workforce would result in not only a higher level of care for children and families, but sector growth and greater access as well. The title of early childhood educator is a protected title. Those who practice are members of the College of Early Childhood Educators. This comes at a cost, means of accountability. We adhere to a strict code of ethics and standards of practice, yet these measures of professionalization have done little to bolster public perception. Childcare is a national crisis that requires a national response. However, it will require the support and collaboration of all levels of government to make it a reality.
Having registered early childhood educators in their classrooms has provided our children with a high quality education because of their specific training in working with young children. We feel that this training gives our ECEs a special advantage in educating young children that isn't well replicated in other settings. Also, as a licensed facility, Preschool of the Arts has been able to ensure class sizes are low, providing healthy lunches and snacks, all the while being a loving, supportive, student-centered environment. Their ability to program for our children has also been excellent, with a focus on inquiry, outdoor, and student-centered learning. Again, we are uncertain that this quality of programming is being provided in any other educational setting. Especially given the current circumstances, our trust in a licensed center with such a focus on the students has made the decision to keep our children at Preschool of the Arts very simple.
Dear Connor, I had the privilege of watching you learn and grow before you were even old enough to remember. Expressing empathy for others, forming meaningful relationships, seeing your sense of wonder flourish. I know these early years will shape the compassionate, resilient, and innovative person you will become. And although you may not remember some of these impactful moments, I will. I'm grateful I had the chance to watch you discover who you are and will be. And because of you, I discovered the best version of myself. Sarah, your early childhood educator.